Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 266. Thanks so much for joining me. Jim Tilley is our guest tonight, really fascinating person. He'll be with us in about 5 minutes, but before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you too, so please do click on the like button, make sure you're subscribed, share, ring the bell for notifications, whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, as we're going to start out with our Poet Respond poem, but our poet this week is in Nigeria, and so couldn't make it. Obviously, it's like 4 a.m. there when we do this live, and we didn't want him to wake up early. He's also in medical school, as you'll see in a second, and so that would be rough, waking up early for that. So here's the note, though. We're going to share the poem anyway, and this is from Ebuka Stephen, and here is the note and what this poem was about, which I didn't know this, that it is World Anatomy Day was the other day, and this poem was written for that. So Ebuka says, "Poetry is a way I reflect on life. It allows me to explore my feelings and enjoy it. I'm attracted to Ghazals, so I hue mine with elegy. I'm currently studying human anatomy at College of Health Sciences, Niwiwi in Nigeria. I dedicate this Ghazal to the dead bodies and bones in every cadaver room, and in commemoration of World Anatomy Day, celebrated every October 15th. And that, if you click on this link, it's interesting information. Is World Anatomy Day. It's the birthday of somebody in, who is it? Andreas Vesalius from the 15th century, I should say, who sort of invented it, one of the first anatomists. And it's in honor of that's World Anatomy Day. And here is the poem that we are going to check out. It's a Ghazal. And there's just something about I don't know, about the giving praise to the things we don't usually give praise to that I loved about this poem, and the music in it too. And so this is a different kind of poem for today. This is Ebuka Stephen's Ghazal of Bones. Who can love me better than the ligaments love my bones? I'm fragile now. My heart can't bear the weight of brokenness, those pains from fractured bones. I heard the night feels lonely too, when the birds choose to leave their nests. I feel the same way, but only skin cuddles my bones. One morning, I lifted up my veil. I saw a Bible, opened it, and it showed me a valley of dry bones. Perhaps I've opened a lonely verse different from the psalms that sang of rising dry bones. I need these miracles, but nobody to go these extra miles for me. I only soak my beads for God to strengthen my bones. Who can calcify me from envy of those who never chew the ripe fruit of forlornness, those who never dreamt of lonely bones? And dreaming is always real until it's not. In a cadaver room, I saw my twin me being loved by formalinated bodies. They showed me skeletons that were made with their bones. All night, every bone in my body tells me to get a deep sleep. They said I'm Adam, that one day a bone will be made from my bones. So a tribute to bones there. Wonderful poem from Ebuka Stephen. And that was your poem of the day today on Rattle.com. As always, if you'd like to share poems about any current events, a lot of times they're about the political stuff that's going on. A lot of times they're about the big stories we talk about. But anything can be celebrated or discussed or thought about in a more deep way with a poem. So if you'd like to share poems, just go to Rattle.com/respond. You have a Friday at midnight deadline. We haven't talked about it in a while in that detail, but go there, submit poems, and submit your news poems, especially with, the United States election season is coming up. Always a lot of interesting topics there to talk about. So share any poems you'd like at Rattle.com/respond. All right, now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Jim Tilley. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Jim Tilley. Jim Tilley is a Canadian-American poet, mathematician, and author of 4 poetry collections, a personal essay, and a novel. Born and raised in Quebec, Jim holds a bachelor's degree in physics from McGill University and a doctorate in physics from Harvard. After earning his PhD, Jim pivoted to actuarial science and established himself as a prominent thought leader in that field. During his 25-year career in insurance and investment banking, he published several prize-winning papers. During his working career, Jim served as Morgan Stanley's global head of fixed income research and chief information officer for Institutional Securities. For 2 years, he worked to help fund the California Earthquake Authority, which I have a lot of experience in, having lived in Wrightwood right on the San Andreas Fault for a while. In his retirement, he studied creative writing through workshops at Middlebury's Loaf Writers Conference, Sarah Lawrence College, and others. His newest book is here from Red Hen Press, Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe, which I'm excited to talk about and share. And here he is, Jim Tilley. Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Very good. Thanks. Thanks very much, Tim, for having me on.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to have you on. I mean, someone contacted me and asked if we'd want to have you on as a guest, and as soon as I saw, physics and mathematician, I knew we had to talk because I love, I love talking to poets who have different backgrounds and aren't the typical professor of poetry somewhere and wrote tons of great books. But it's really fun to have people with outside perspectives, and you certainly have that. Do you want to start out reading a poem?
Yes, I'd like to read the title poem of the collection of the book called Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe. The conditions are right. A cloudless dome not cluttered with pinpricks of light, dust still collecting itself into night. A view clear to the horizon, my gaze a full sweep of 180 degrees. Overhead, the summer triangle as sharp as I've ever found it. To the south, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars aligned. Maybe an omen that the unrest growing in the world might play itself out before its tidal waves sweep away everything we hold dear. In the grand scheme of things, they're mere ripples in the fabric of the universe, but not to us here on Earth.
Yeah, I mean that's such a great metaphor in that poem and a great description of our reality here. That was the title poem from Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe. But yeah, I mean it's like similar to that blue dot photo. I mean every single problem, every war, every tragedy being contained in those handful of blue pixels looking back from space really puts everything into perspective. And that's what we are. We're all ripples or little eddies in the stream of the universe, and we're here and then not. And so really great poem to end the collection with, actually. Jim, to start out, I'm really curious about your background, like I said, because I love poets who do different things. And I, too, I have this, myself, I started in the sciences. I was a molecular biology major, I thought the future was in molecular biology, so I found an RNA research lab. We were studying the conformational binding structures of macromolecules, like thinking about mRNA vaccines, actually. And then I took this big right turn. I felt like it wasn't interesting enough. Like it wasn't like something I could be focused on for a long enough time, in sciences. And it felt like there was something more there. And so I took this turn into poetry and into Buddhism, and those are more interested in those things. And then so when I meet somebody who had this really wonderful career in hard sciences and in mathematics, and then turned to poetry at a different point in their life, I love to hear that, and I love to hear why did you take on poetry after having done so much already? Like what did you find that was missing out of all that? But first, lay out your background and what you were doing and how you took that turn after retiring into poetry.
Sure. Well, my father was a physicist, and so it was sort of natural growing up in his household to cultivate a love for mathematics and sciences. And I guess you could say it was easy to just sort of follow in his footsteps. So without much thought, that's what I did. But I will say from a very early age, I liked to write. I liked to scribble. And in high school, I was co-editor of our small high school's literary magazine called Signature. And well, it was hard to get people to contribute to that. So shall we say the co-editors contributed a lot to it as well. Um, When I finished my doctorate in physics, I sort of realized with the group of people I was with at Harvard that I didn't really want to do that for a living. I wanted to do something more practical and frankly, probably a little more rewarding in a financial sense.
Hmm.
So I asked myself, what can I do with this mathematics background? And the answer was actuarial science. I had been introduced to actuaries in the insurance business by my father, and I was born in Montreal and I grew up just south of Montreal. And so I got to know some Canadian actuaries well. And Sun Life of Canada in particular had opened up a US operation in Wellesley, Massachusetts. So I went there and presented myself, and they said, if you can solve these couple of problems and you can pass those first two tests, we'll hire you. And that sort of launched that. And then I began to realize that it wasn't the mathematics of actuarial science I liked as much as the investment side of the organization.
Hmm.
Um, and so I started to talk to the investment people and realized that the two sides of the organization, the people who sold products and generated the liabilities, weren't talking to the people who invested the funds that came in, the premiums that were collected, and there was a huge mismatch. And if
Hmm.
interest rates spiked, as indeed they did, everything would come unglued. And
Hmm.
it was a good thing the insurance industry wasn't marked to market, or they would have been bankrupt.
Hmm.
So I made a bit of a name for myself writing papers on that and so on. So I did again a lot of writing, but a lot of papers. It was all passive voice. It was all research. It was what you would expect maybe from someone who had graduated with a degree in physics. And yet, when I finally retired, I realized I wanted to do creative writing.
Hmm.
And I hadn't really done any in a long time. And the last time I did it was high school, and frankly, wasn't much good. So I started to take workshops all over the place. Palm Beach Poetry Festival,
Hmm.
um, did Bread Loaf for 9 summers. And it's really interesting to do that when you're coming from a different background in a different place. You sort of think, well, hey, I can write. But you find out, no, you can't really write.
Yeah. So,
So
yeah.
you come up the curve quickly.
Hmm. So did you have, like, while you were doing all this, work in finance, did you have poetry or writing in the back of your mind? Like, you knew that eventually you would, because one of the things too, Rattle was founded by Alan Fox, who was in investment real estate, and the whole time in the back of his head, he always knew he wanted to write, and then he knew once he got sort of established enough, then he could be afforded the opportunity to, and so it was always there. And then once he had the opportunity, he made Rattle and started doing things like that. Was that the same way for you? Did you feel always knew that you were going to go there, or was there something that happened that made you turn, and
Not
realize, oh,
always.
I was always missing this? Yeah.
Not always. I would say I had my nose to the grindstone in my 30s and 40s when I was working at Morgan Stanley. But then I realized, hey, the reason you work at a place like this is so you can retire early and do what you really want to do. And what is it you really want to do? Well, I wanted to write. So
Mm-hmm.
I will say I realized probably 5 years before I retired that that's what I was going to do. And it didn't take me long to just sort of dive into it. As
Uh-huh.
I said, I had to learn a lot, but I decided to dive into it. So the answer is sort of yes and no. Not
Mm-hmm.
early in the career, but certainly before retirement.
Yeah. Well, let's dive into another poem. What do you want to read next?
I want to read a poem that's in memory of my sister-in-law who died at age 51 in 2016. It's called You Choose to Die in Your Bed. The doctors honored your request to stay at home in your own bed. You chose the side you've always slept on, near the window through which, when you are conscious for moments that no longer linger, you can watch the remaining leaves. Everything else just branches and twigs, detach in the wind. Now you hear wings. The birds also on their way. It's the passing of fall, this final falling away, leaf by leaf, bird by bird. And you, pound by pound. Your body nearly weightless now, skin drawn tight over bones, almost porous. You light enough to be able, at last, to fly.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem in memory of my sister-in-law. You choose to die in your bed. And that is again another poem from Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe, the new book, a new and selected book of poems from Jim Tilley. So after making that turn, Jim, into poetry, with all that life experience in other fields that are so different from poetry, I think maybe physics and math I can see. I have a friend who is a PhD mathematician who works at the NSA, and he's always trying to explain to me how like numbers are poetry, and it just makes really no sense to me. Maybe we can talk about that later. But among all but investment banking is probably like the farthest thing removed from poetry you could possibly be, both in the reward system and just how you
Yes,
go about doing it. So what
yes.
did you learn? Like I assume you brought all these skills to the table as a poet. Like what things transferred over when you started to tackle being a writer versus being in more hard science fields? Was there something that things that you learned that you brought to the table when you tackled it?
Um, Probably not of the kind you're thinking, but yes, very much so. When I was at Morgan Stanley, I was head of fixed income research. I wrote a lot of research papers, and my goal in those research papers was to take difficult subjects and make them absolutely as simple as one could
Hmm.
without doing any injustice to what was really going on. And, that's an art. And that requires revision and revision and revision. I don't think you undertake that unless you love words and you love what words can do.
Hmm.
There's a bit of a teacher in me, as there was in my father. And what a teacher has to do is take concepts that at least some people, perhaps many, find difficult and render them understandable.
Hmm.
Um, and that's good writing. Now, it's different. It's passive voice, but it's still a love of words. It's still writing things down. It's still trying to do it as succinctly as you can. No one wants to read a 50-page research paper.
Hmm.
Maybe an abstract and a few pages.
uh,
So yeah, that was a skill I honed.
hmm.
Um, the other thing that I honed, which I think really did transfer over, my last 4 years at Morgan Stanley, I was the chief information officer for Institutional Securities. And that meant in the end, I had 3,500 people working for me.
Oh wow.
Now, not directly, of course, I had about 10 direct reports, but you deal with all kinds of people problems in that. Some people would say, of course, you're dealing with, technical people. You're dealing with computer people. Of course, you're going to be dealing with problems because their strengths aren't dealing with people very well.
Hmm.
I think that point is oversold. They can actually deal with people quite well. But I had a lot of problems I had to deal with. So I got to know people. I got to try to see into people and what it was that was motivating them, what would motivate them more, and so on. I think that is a skill actually that you bring to writing poetry, particularly poetry about relationships, about people.
Hmm.
And in fact, the metaphors, taking things for me in nature, I'm an outdoors person, and bringing those back to
Hmm.
relationships.
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely. The clarity point that you mentioned is so key to me. It seems because your writing is very clear in your poetry, and I think that's something that's really missing so much in a lot of contemporary poems. Like you read it, and we go through on the critique of the week we do every Friday. And half the time, people who participate can attest. The real question is like, what is this poem actually about? Like, who is talking to who? And and it seems like when you're writing, that everybody knows what you're talking about because you know what you're talking about. But there's something about being clear and succinct that's actually really difficult, a really difficult talent to do. And the best poets are the ones that are able to distill that in a really clear way. So I think that's a good thing to key on. Well, us hear another poem. I want to make sure we
Yeah,
get through.
on that point,
Uh-huh.
actually,
Yeah.
some of my favorite poets do that very well. Like
Mm-hmm.
Billy Collins does that very well. Stephen Dunn did it very well. And I could name handfuls of others. But the next poem I want to read is Billy and Stephen and Me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad because I meant to make that a segue into Billy, and I totally forgot halfway through my sentence. I'm glad you picked that up.
No problem. I picked it up. So this poem is for Billy Collins and Stephen Dunn. Billy would tell you about the little flame at the end of his pen while he rocks in the hammock, listening to wild turkeys rustle last autumn's leaves as they run toward and away from the stream. Stephen would tell you he's like the turkeys, unsure whether he's coming or going, how that confusion has a certain beauty which can't be uprooted once it takes hold. And I'm the one in the hammock, reading both on this first warm day of spring, coming from one to the other, going back, pausing every few pages to let the words plant themselves, and thinking how hard it was last fall to drill holes in each urn's composite base so this year's flowers wouldn't drown. Likely red, white, and pink impatience again, because habits don't break easily, and those flowers crave shade. Billy would say there's too much shade in the world, and Stephen, that we cast too much on ourselves.
Yeah, I love that last line in particular in that poem. That was Billy and Stephen and me. And the funny thing too is read a couple poems and then looked at the back of the book, and you have the Billy Collins blurb there too. And so I read a few poems, and I went back to read that. Then I went back to the book, and there was the Billy Collins and me and Stephen and me poem too. So do you know Billy Collins, and have you met Stephen Dunn? Because we've interviewed both in Rattle, and Stephen Dunn
Yes,
especially for me was like this epic journey. Going to Frostburg, Maryland, and it had to be a snowstorm. I switched my
oh,
rental car from a little economy hatchback to an SUV so I could make it through the hills of like
I
rural
thought you meant something
Pennsylvania.
else. I thought you meant just meeting him and talking him was an epic storm.
It was though. I mean, the whole thing was, and then he'd show, and it was amazing because it was like, I was like really worried I was going to make it through the storm, and then you kind of come through, and they have this long driveway, and there's like everything is dark, and then the lights were just up in their house, and then his wife came out and invited me in, like it was like some kind of Mecca journey, and then
Sure.
to have Stephen's wisdom there in his office was just an amazing thing. I mean, really, one of the highlights of my life was getting to meet Stephen Dunn before he passed away.
Let me
And
talk about Stephen
yeah.
second, but Billy first. He has read poetry at a fundraiser in my home,
Hmm.
and he sort of stood up on the staircase and sort of talked down to all of us. I played golf with Billy. He loves golf. Um, since he might actually see this sometime, I'll say that, he's better than a lot of golfers.
Well, that's some faint praise, but we'll take it. He's better than me. We could also say that because I can't hit a drive like more than 5 feet off the ground. So
Stephen Dunn is without question my favorite poet.
mhm.
I guess it's a was at this stage, but he still is my favorite poet. Um, he was the first workshop leader I ever had. It was the Palm Beach Poetry Festival. And in those, you have, as is typical for workshops, you have one-on-ones. You get your chance one-on-one with the workshop leader. Um, and at one point during that, he leaned across the table and whispered to me, Jim, do you ever think you send out your poems too early? And I, probably flushed and said, yes, you can tell. And then he leaned even further across the table and said, I do too. Very
Yeah,
humble.
that is. I think Michael Mark had a story similar to that because after I interviewed him, Michael's like, Tim, I want to do the same thing, and I think he had something very similar to happen to. Hey, Stephen was just a great person, and just so that honesty and that sense of humor too, and all good nature too is just wonderful.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
so that brings it up to question. You said that Stephen Dunn is still alive. And he is, and is that part of the motivation to be a poet for you? Is to have a stamp that outlasts you in words? Because that seems like such a big part of it for so many people.
I think so. I mean, I keep trying to ask myself whether that's too vain, but yes, the idea is to write some things down that at least um, my children, their children, progeny, if nothing wider than that cone of people, would say, "Hey, that was my father, that was my grandfather, that was my great grandfather." But no, I'd like it to be broader than that. I've collected a lot of poetry friends over the years through these workshops, and I'd like to think that they enjoy reading these things too.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, one quick question from Katie Tozer, who's downstairs, and a former professional poker player, maybe current too, and also an editor at Rattle. And she wants to know if you've ever played poker with Billy Collins.
no, I don't play poker with anyone for a very good reason. I have a face that telegraphs everything.
Oh, yeah. That would be trouble.
That would be serious trouble. I mean, I couldn't bluff. I couldn't do anything like that. I mean, I like the math behind poker, the betting, the odds and things, but no, I don't play.
Yeah. Well, let's hear the next poem, Jim.
This one harks back to my childhood. It's called Boys, and it's a free verse sonnet. My friends and I couldn't buy cherry bombs on our weekly allowances. We hoped that plain firecrackers would be enough to tear off arms and legs. A privates, not ours. We were the generals. We ran the war, decided where to plant soldiers in trenches we sculpted in mounds left by bulldozers on the construction site. After the flap about the curry boy losing an eye, we imposed a ceasefire for a week. Then came the all-out surge to do some serious damage, the kind that requires you to eat 2 bowls of cornflakes every day to build your army from cereal box toys.
Yeah, and that was Boys. Another, those stories that wouldn't remain anymore, as sort of ripples in the fabric of the universe, to put it one way. I mean, it makes the ripple last longer to put it into poems. And I don't think there's anything vain about wanting to do that. Um, so I want to talk more about the relationship between that thing I talked about with math being a kind of poetry. Did you feel it that way? I mean, I'm trying to remember like what my friend would always say as he was like, over a few beers trying to convince me that we were interested in the same things, because he was really into numbers theory, or is. And somehow, numbers being symbols and the intricacies of the way they interconnect, like how pi is built and things like that. Um, there's a poetry in that. Do you feel that, working on, for example, like working on a difficult mathematical problem, do you feel the same kind of sort of meditative focus as you do in writing a poem? Are they
Ab-
intertwined in ways like that?
Absolutely. And the same kind of buzz when you actually put something together that you know is good. In other words, in math, it would be solving the problem. I have a math friend that I met in high school as a result of a math competition held across Canada, where the top three finishers in each province got to go to a conference. And he went to McGill, as did I. He was in math, I was in physics. But we've maintained a friendship, and he now puts out a problem of the week. It's sort of got a POW kind of acronym, which isn't so cool, but it's problem of the week. And I solve most of them. And in fact, I've actually posed some with him. What I find there is that your mind twists and twists until you can actually see a way through. And usually the solution for his problems is they're very elegant.
Mm-hmm.
They're very short, they're very simple, they require a kind of insight, not just a smashing of the algebra or the calculus or things like that. They require some creative putting together of things,
Mm-hmm.
as does a poem.
Yeah.
And I think the buzz that I get, that I feel when I solve a math problem, is the same kind when I know I've sort of struck gold or, hit a home run with a
Uh-huh.
poem. It doesn't happen often enough with poetry, but when it does, you can feel it. As you say, you single out a line or two or a
Mm-hmm.
stanza that just nailed it.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great sort of, I don't know if it's even a metaphor, but that feeling, you see scenes sometimes. I remember from math classes where there's a huge equation on the chalkboard, and then finally you're getting the proof down where everything balances out and you're just Xing, and there's like this joy of like stripping it down to this like nugget of purity, which is the proof at the bottom of the field, which feels so much like the last period on a poem where you're like, that's the end, that's the last
Yep.
line. Yeah,
Well, I'll give
yeah.
you an example. This latest POW, has to do with it's called an Alice and Bob problem. Alice and Bob, A for Alice and B for Bob. Alice and Bob do battle with each other. They want to try to win, so they pose games. Um, and this game is Alice says, the Earth is a perfect sphere. I'm choosing 2 points on Earth. I'm not telling you what they are. And Bob, you have to choose a point, and you're going to have to do it at random because you have no clue about the points I've chosen. And Alice says, I win if the triangle formed by these 3 points have all acute angles. Every angle's less than 90 degrees.
Hmm.
You win, Bob, if any one of the angles is obtuse. Well, there can only be one, obtuse or a right angle. If it's a right angle or obtuse. Okay, that sounds pretty mathy, and it is, but the solution is amazing. What Bob says to Alice, you pay me $1 if I'll pay you $1 if you win. You have to pay me $1.60 if I win. And the question is simple. Should Alice take the bet? Is it
Hmm.
worth it for Alice to take the bet? Or should 160 have been a different number for her to be indifferent between taking the bet or not? Well, guess what the answer turns out to be? It's unbelievable. It goes all the way back to the Greeks in their architecture,
Hmm.
the golden ratio in a rectangle, the ratio of the width to the length. And it's called the golden ratio. It's supposed to be the most pleasing rectangle to the eye. And guess what it comes out? The golden ratio is 1.61 something or other. So
Hmm.
1.60 slightly favors her. But the
Oh.
idea that it
Hmm.
came out to the golden ratio was incredible. I'm like, where did that come from? Has
Yeah.
nothing to do with spheres and points on it.
Yeah. So what do you think that like where does it come from? Why is there this like beauty and harmony to the universe when does it seem surprising and startling to us just because we're easily surprised and startled, or is there something that's genuinely I mean, is there's so many strange coincidences like that
It's genuine. It
yeah.
really is genuine. I mean, Richard Feynman, the famous physicist, the one who actually, you remember when one of the spacecraft blew up, imploded on the thing, and he, in front of Congress, held up a glass of ice water and put the O-ring, the seal, the O-ring into it, and came out and said, "See, it's stiff. It's stiff. It leaked. Explosion."
Hmm.
Okay. Richard Feynman, very famous physicist, said the most elegant equation in the whole world, in all of mathematics, is the number E, the transcendental number E, raised to the power of I, the imaginary number, square root of -1, times pi, e to the I pi, plus 1 equals 0. It involves 0, the additive identity, 1, the multiplicative identity, has a plus sign, has an equal sign, involves E, I, and pi.
Hmm.
Now, that's not going to mean anything to almost all the listeners here tonight. It
Uh-huh.
may not even mean anything to you, but to a mathematician, that's just an astounding thing.
Yeah, I mean it's the
Uh,
same kind of thing as like the fact that the visible size of the moon and the sun are identical, because the one is exactly the same. The sun is exactly as much larger than this moon as it is farther away than the moon, so they're actually the exact same size in the sky. I mean, why?
and you get a perfect eclipse. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there should not be perfect eclipses, but I
Mhm.
mean, the odds of that are just so infinitesimally small. But and yet, it's just something that we just had in the spring.
Well, you're quite right, because go to another planet that has many moons. It's not true for all those moons.
Hmm.
It's just not
Yeah.
true.
Hmm. So I mean, it is part of what we do as poets exploring that mystery, like that we don't know why these relationships are there, but they're there, and we're drawn to them. Is that a part of it for you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it is. I mean, to me, it's the connections. You just made a connection. To me, it's the connections between things in nature and what's going on in the world around. And a lot of my poems are about that.
Hmm.
Um, maybe, should I read a poem that I think sort of illustrates that?
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Feel free to go off script too if you want.
Yeah, I'm going to. sort of skip over one that I was going to do next, and I'm going to read this poem called Richter 7.8. So right away, we know this is about earthquakes. Especially you in California would know that Richter 7.8 is a pretty big earthquake. This poem has an epigraph. The epigraph is from Robert Caldwell, a cosmologist. Dark energy and dark matter describe proposed solutions to as yet unresolved gravitational phenomena. So far as we know, the two are distinct. Such a waste to spend a life thinking about the impossible to figure out, like where the spirit goes when detached from the body. An alternative universe, perhaps. That's where dark matter enters, not how physicists hypothesize, but the way it casts light on everyday affairs. I, for one, am stuck on the question of how dark matter and energy can be separate and distinct when plain mass and energy are equivalent. We're told we need both types of darkness to fill what's missing, yet one pulls us together while the other propels us apart. What we can't find in our world must be the substance of another, worlds that look to each other for what's missing, each a resting place for the other's souls, an answer to why any God would allow a quake to bury 900 children under a school. What's so incomprehensible here on earth may be making sense in the place where all those students have found new flesh to wear.
Yeah, it's a beautiful ending to that poem too. That was Richter 7.8. Again, these are poems from Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe, new and selected poems by Jim Tilley. Someone asked what new and selected means, and that means that there's some poems from previous books all gathered together, and then some new poems too. And so a new and selected book is like if you don't have any Jim Tilley books yet, it's like the prime one to purchase, basically.
Yeah, buy this one.
Yeah, it's a beautiful copy. Hardcover, too, from Red Hen Press, which is the publisher that published my book years ago. It's a wonderful press, too. You mentioned that poem, Dark Matter, and I'm curious how much your background in physics got into, astronomy and things like that, too. And if you have any thoughts about just the strangest, do you think there's something completely missing in physics, or do you think that the models basically need to be tweaked? Because I keep, we read a lot, especially for the Sciku at the end, and Dick Westheimer reads a lot of astronomy poems on the open lines later. And, there's a lot of things that are really big discoveries, especially with the James Webb Telescope. It's found galaxies. We think the universe is 14 billion years old, but then there's galaxies that seem like they're twice as old, and it doesn't make sense. And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that. The whole thing about, dark matter is a sort of there's not a really great evidence for it, and yet it's there in the math. Do you think that there's some big missing thing, or do you think we have the mostly complete picture and we're tweaking it still?
Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. It depends on the domain of what you're trying to look at. If you're trying to look at how phenomena work on planet Earth, we build swings, we do all kinds of things. We understand that. We understand that to as many decimal points as you would like to know it. There's nothing new to discover there. Um, but quantum mechanics sort of changed everything. So, for example, just a few weeks ago, there was a paper published on negative time. Things happening, observing things before they happen.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just think about it, it's utterly mind-blowing as many things are in quantum mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
My view on this is actually pretty simple. It's not incredibly learned because I didn't sort of really do this for a living for a whole career. But I don't think there'll ever be a time when we say we know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be beyond presumptuous. Um, so long as people keep thinking and keep pressing at the boundary, there's going to be new phenomena that are unexplained. As you said, the Hubble telescope.
Mm-hmm.
It brings into focus quite literally things that, we couldn't see before and things that need to be understood. Um, I I really do think that we'll never get to a point where we actually know everything, but within certain domains. I mean, maybe even within the domain of quantum mechanics, 50, 100, 200 years from now, we'll sort of view that as completed as the phenomena that occur on planet Earth or on
Hmm.
Jupiter or something like that. Um, in a way, I'm sort of glad that I chose not to do that for a living
Hmm.
because those problems are very hard. And it gets very frustrating when you can't solve a problem.
Hmm. Yeah, especially when you devote like 50 years to it.
Yeah.
But I do love. I think it's Stephen Hawking's last book about the theory of or everything. I can't remember the title of it, but he talks about the way it's like sort of like that elephant metaphor where the blind monks feeling the elephant and some of them feel the trunk and say it's a snake and the legs and say it's a tree. And physics is actually this like patchwork of like different scales where you see you see this part and it makes sense here, and then you don't see, you see this part over here and it makes sense, but then you try to converge them, and that's the problem. And seeing the whole picture might be impossible, it's just too big. Like it's an information problem. Like it's impossible to contain all the information that we have.
Yeah, it's also a dimensional problem. I mean, we live in a 3D world here on Earth, or four if you want to include time. But the fact is, the Earth is, locally is fairly flat. Okay. And so a lot of what we do and a lot of what we can think about best is
Mm-hmm.
two-dimensional stuff you can put on a piece of paper, draw on a piece of paper. Three
Mm-hmm.
dimensions are harder for most people. They're certainly harder for me. Four, five, six dimensions, my goodness, forget about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people out there who don't find four, five, and six dimensions difficult at all.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
God.
that's true. And the other fascinating thing about that whole analogy and the way that that's actually physics is that that's our experience of the world too. Like we each have a unique perspective, and then all these filters, these cognitive filters that we see the world through, and so we're primed with our confirmation biases and things like that to see a certain way, and the world becomes like different movies. I think this time I was watching 16 Candles, and I had a little bit of the reefer, and I was
Mhm.
sure that it was a surprise birthday party was like planned at the end, and it was like they were all playing this elaborate prank on them because I was a little high. And but the thing is, if you watch the movie from that perspective, it works completely. Like you could see everything is like a setup. They're just like messing with her, so I'll be really surprised at the party. And then when the movie was over, I was like, oh, where's the surprise party? But it worked, and that's kind of how our experience with everything is. Like we pick our political tribes, and we see the world through that frame. We have these experiences, we see the world through that frame, and then we have uh, and it's hard to bridge the different frames together so we can see things from the same perspective. And to bring it all
Yeah.
back, like that's what poetry does. It allows other people to enter our frame, and that's really the power of it, I think.
If we do it well enough.
Yeah,
I
well, that's a
agree
good
with you
point.
on a statement you made earlier. Sometimes you read poems and you say, should I be working harder at this? I don't quite get it. And sometimes you should, because there's really good stuff there. And sometimes I really feel you probably shouldn't. Uh, maybe this would be a place for a poem that mathematics inspired,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, that'd be
not
great. And I
physics
try to
or,
actually confess, I read this in the example, and I didn't really understand. This is not a branch of math that I went down.
yeah,
So,
and you know what? The stuff I sent you this morning, I'm gonna paraphrase, so
mhm.
I won't leave everybody behind.
Okay. Well, I'll put the image will be up on screen for everybody, so they'll see what you sent.
You gonna put the Birkhoff diamond
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
yeah,
So this is a
put that up
Birkhoff
there.
diamond you're looking at now.
Yeah. Birkhoff was a famous mathematician around 1910, 1920. And one of the things he was working on was a famous problem that took more than 100 years to solve called the four-color problem. And the way to think about the four-color problem is take a map of the 48 states, the contiguous 48 states of the United States, and you're asked to color the map in the following way. The map is 48 states. You're asked to color each state, give each state a color such that if any two states have a common border, they have to have different colors.
Hmm.
So the question then is, well, how many colors do you need? Do you need six, five, four? What is it? And the answer is you only need four.
Hmm.
And you only need four no matter how complicated that map drawn on a piece of paper is. Took
Really? Wow.
over
So you could make like a long, skinny state with weird isthmuses and stuff, and it still doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
But it took over 100 years for that to be solved. And you know how people solved it? They converted the map problem into a graph problem. Now, don't think of your high school math where you had y versus x and you drew some kind of curve. That's not the kind of graph I'm talking about. The mathematical object called a graph is a bunch of points and a bunch of lines joining the points. The points are called vertices, the lines are called edges. The one you're seeing there, the Birkhoff diamond, is famous because it was integral to solving the four-color problem. So I wrote a poem called The Graph of You. And what's interesting about this is it'll become very clear very quickly, so I don't mind saying it up front. This is math-inspired love poem. Now, as I've been told, love poems are a place you stay away from. They're hard to write. This is called The Graph of You. I've been thinking of you. And I've been thinking about graphs, those mathematical objects composed of lines joining one point to the next. With a finger, I draw a line from A to B along your body, knowing where that will lead. My flesh touching your flesh, healing each other's wounds.
Yeah, but the context of that too, that's an extra layer of powerfulness in that. That's the graph of you, again, from Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe. Yeah. And it's just so interesting to see, poets that come at things from a different perspective, which is why we're really grateful to have you on. You mentioned earlier sort of being, writing being like trying to solve a complicated math problem where you're trying to find, imagine a way through a problem. And I've found over the years that there's sort of two ways people go about approaching poetry. There's one which is more my kind, or like a Bob Hickok type or something, where you sort of just let your mind wander and see where it wanders, and
Right.
and Billy Collins, speaking of him again in our interview with Rattle, he called it like writing is like being a bloodhound. You're just looking for a scent that's going to lead to something interesting, and then you follow it until you get to the interesting thing, and that's what writing is like. But then other people though talk about it. It's more like it's trying to find, like where you want to get, but you don't know how to get there. And sort of the joy of discovery is in finding your way through the maze that will eventually lead you to the direction you were trying to go. And it sounds to me like maybe you're more in the latter, where do you have an idea? Like, what's your writing process like? Do you sort of know where it's going and then tease out the path there?
Yeah,
Or do you
I
not
think
know?
it's more like that. So, I mean, one of the poems, and I won't read it, it's in a new collection that will come out in a few years. I was walking through the woods like I like to do that on a path, and I came across a tree that just had all kinds of burls and knots and just all kinds of crazy stuff. And I thought, wow, that is something I can turn into a poem that's not about that at all. And so I had a general idea where I wanted to go. I even had an idea of the ending of where I wanted to get to, but I couldn't get there easily. In fact, it took quite a lot of writing and revising to get there. The way I would describe it is you can't write a poem unless you sit down with your notebook. So I guess some people just type it out, but I'm still old-fashioned. I like to write longhand. And the reason I do that is I write slowly and I don't want my brain to get too far ahead of where I'm writing.
Hmm.
Um, so I start to write and I start to write and I start to write. And what Billy Collins would say, wow, that was a long on-ramp until you found something useful. And that often happens. Sometimes it's lucky. A poem is born almost whole,
Hmm.
and it requires fairly minor revisions. But a lot of what I do starts off twice or three times the length it needs to be. And part of that is it happens because I'm trying to find out what it is the poem is really about. And it hasn't spoken itself to me yet.
Hmm.
And when it does, then a lot of stuff falls away and it becomes a lot clearer.
Yeah, well, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Well, I should say, if you're enjoying this conversation, please do click the like button. There's always like twice as many people watching as have clicked like so far live. So do click that if you would. It really helps other people find it. And if I remind you halfway through the show, that helps a lot too. Also, if you have any questions for Jim, please leave them in the chat windows, either on Facebook or YouTube, and I can pass anything along. It helps if you put question in bold so I can see it, that it's a question, and find it if I scroll back. But yeah, ask anything you want of Jim. Let's hear another poem, Jim.
Yeah, I find often that poems are self-revelatory, that there's something about yourself that's been bothering you, and writing about it might just be therapy, and maybe it's a subject for you and your therapist, but sometimes there's actually a poem there. So here's a humorously self-deprecating poem. It's called My Dancing Jeans. My dancing jeans. In high school, I went to sock hops because there was nothing else to do on those nights, and everybody attended. Not cool if you didn't, especially in the eyes of the girl you had your heart set on way back in the days when girls lined up on one side of the cafeteria and boys on the other. The teacher who supervised the evening, keeping the two a proper distance apart during slow dances. The only ones I'd say yes to any girl who asked me. I had no rhythm for the fast ones. Couldn't shake my body in a cool way or swivel my hips. Didn't know what to do with my arms. But my freshly washed jeans, hanging on the line in the wind, have now mastered those moves, each leg doing its own thing as if the other doesn't exist. That's what I needed long ago. And a long-sleeved cotton shirt out there, too, to show me how to rock and roll my arms.
Yeah, that's great. That is My Dancing Jeans from Jim Tilley, a poem from a forthcoming collection. So about I noticed that there are a lot, and I don't know if that's 14 lines. It looks like it on the, given my judge. There's a lot of American sonnets in your work,
Yeah,
which is
well,
yeah.
the new one has 76 of them.
Okay, well there you go. And so I wonder about that form. There's been some online controversy not too long ago because Dan Seuss won the Pulitzer Prize for
Yes.
sonnets that even these are sort of the size. They're not metered, they're not rhymed, but they're sort of the size. Hers have a more prose poem even feel in 14 lines, and people wonder like why are those sonnets? Shoot. Okay, and it's an interesting question. So why are you drawn to that form?
For a very simple reason. Some people are drawn to a form of, say, haiku,
Mm-hmm.
that they get everything they spark everything they want to spark in a reader in those one line, two line, three lines, however they choose to do it. I can't do that. I'm no good at that. And I tend to make my biggest mistakes writing long, long, long poems that are just too long. What I like to do is write a poem as a vignette. And a vignette I can put into a 14 line box. Sometimes the lines are shorter, sometimes they're longer. Sometimes I make them deliberately longer just so they'll be 14 lines and I can call them a free verse sonnet, unmetered, unrhymed, and put them in the book. Um, as you can tell, my poetry is narrative. Uh, it's probably easier to follow than some lyric poems and things. And that's just me. But everyone is a vignette. Sometimes they're closer to lyrical, they're focusing on setting and imagery and things like that. More often, they're trying to tell a little bit of a story.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that the box of 14 lines is a good box for me.
Yeah, yeah. And it makes me think about how a poem needs an arc because it has to go somewhere. Something has to be transformed, and to have an arc, you need like a launch angle. Even if you're shooting something straight up, like Elon Musk's to the Mars, it has a much different feel than if it's something that has an arc and it's going to land 15 lines away. It kind of gives you a sense of where you're going and where to turn. And I think the conclusion of what a sonnet really is. It's a poem of that around length that has a turn at a certain point, and so the arc is compressed into that length.
Yeah. I like to think that most of my free verse sonnets respect one aspect of sonnets, and that is there's sort of a volta. There's sort of
Mm-hmm.
a first 8 lines or so, and then there's a turn and something's going on. Um, my editor at Red Hen, who you will probably know well, Kate Gale,
Mm-hmm.
um, looked through my latest collection, which she has accepted for publication a few years down the road. And she said, Jim, you really need more electric titles. Your titles are just so boring for the most part. And so she gave me a few suggestions, some of which I took and some of which I didn't, but I took it as a challenge to have more electric titles. And then I was walking one day and I thought, ooh, I'm going to play a little trick on her. I'm going to write a poem whose title is Ampere, Ohm, Volt, and Watt, all terms of electricity.
Hmm.
Ampere is a measure of current, ohm is a measure of resistance, volt is a measure, well, of potential, and watt, of course, power. And so I wrote the poem, but I ended the poem almost like a ghazal. So he's looking up through this huge tower, these high tension lines, and sees the God on high. And the God on high speaks to the narrator and says, Jim, no Volta here. You better write a ghazal. So there's a companion
Uh-huh.
poem. She asked to write a ghazal. And it isn't a ghazal. It starts off trying to be one. It just can't be a ghazal. So it's seven couplets, again, a sonnet.
That's a lot of fun. Well, let's hear. I think we have two poems left. Let's read the second last. Do you want to do Folding, which is the one from Rattle from back in 2004, I believe.
Yeah, it was on, and then I saw it sort of either appearing on your website or something in about 2010. Yeah, this is
Yeah, yeah, because we're going back. I mean, what it is, we had everything in print, and then day by day go back through the archives and add things. So eventually, it's all online. So yeah.
yeah, this one's called Folding. I stare blankly at my mother-in-law's longhand legacy to her daughter. Crisco thumbprints smearing some of the India ink. My wife's away and my son waits for his Sunday pancakes as I puzzle over fold buttermilk and an egg into the dry ingredients. No hints, merely a warning. I've learned that major perils attend misfolding, that protein stuck midstream, half folded on the way to proper states, can transform a normal brain into bubbly batter with lumps. I've been taught how to fold laundered shirts and sheets, items I burn at times while ironing out problems, but never as badly as the toast I charred today. I unfold the morning paper, sit down with my black coffee to digest the week in review, and note as I read about the latest bombings that recipes don't always turn out right, that sometimes it may be better to fold, even for the master chef.
Yeah, and that was Folding, one of the poems selected from the older books, from Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe by Jim Tilley. It's interesting too, Jim. That might be, I mean, I don't know what the odds are, but it's one in, I don't know, 20 or so. That was one that the first poem I picked for Rattle because that was the first issue I started reading submissions was
Oh,
that issue number 22, fresh off of working in a lab folding proteins and modeling the binding structures. So that's an interesting coincidence and fun to think back. And I remember that poem, and there's the joy of finding interesting things in submissions, which still that's the thing that never gets boring. You never know what you're going
right.
to come across in a submission, and having those things compared is something you don't expect, but then feels so right too. We had a question about the cover. I can't remember. I guess scroll up to see who asked it, but somebody wanted to know what the cover was. So I'll put it on screen again. Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe, and it's sort of like a river meeting the ocean or something kind of thing, but very smooth. There it is for everybody who wants to look. So what is this image of, Jim, and how did you choose it and why for the cover?
Well, the answer is I didn't.
Okay.
I chose the cover for my very first book, In Confidence, from which some of these poems have come. And it was a painting that a friend of mine, an employee friend of mine, had done. And ever since then, Red Hen has decided that I'm not really good at covers, but they are. And they're right. They had a brilliant cover for my novel. It was about transgender people, and it had not really a silhouette, a headshot from the back with colors, the head evaporating, just all little bits and pieces evaporating into the air. It was really a spectacular cover. They chose this cover. It's got ripples in it, clearly. You can see it more in the sand than the water. It's sort of got a universe kind of idea by looking way out to the horizon and things. But I just didn't question it. I saw this cover and my instant reaction was, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and it's Mark Cull, I think. I assume, who still does the covers. Interestingly, too, he a former JPL. I don't know if he's a physicist by training, but he worked at JPL before he became the publisher and cover designer at Red Hen. So that's an interesting connection too. A lot of fun conversations you two have, I imagine.
Yeah, he's actually stepped away from that job just recently.
Oh, has he? Yeah.
Yeah, he's I think he's going to enjoy his retirement.
Well, that's good. He's a great person, fascinating person. Well, let's see. I think we're up on time, Jim. Do you want to read the one last poem that we have?
I'll read the one last poem. It's one that's very near and dear to me because it involves my relationship with my father. It's called Half Finished Bridge. No important work to do today, I think, as I lie in the hammock one last time before storing it for winter. Just a few chores around the yard, deck chairs to be stacked and stashed away, and the lawn raked despite the pears and oaks hanging on to their green. Stamped on the pencil I'm using, first snow falling on the half-finished bridge. Now as in Bashaw's time, the halfway done, possibly a road to nowhere, like the wars we shouldn't start and the marriages we can't finish. But he must have meant that I find myself amidst the season's first flurries, leaves collecting at my feet as I rock in the wind, writing to my father that I'm grateful he's still alive, and there's time to erect the rest of the trestle and walk together to the other side, light snow falling on our backs.
Yeah, another great poem. That was Half Finished Bridge. Again, these are poems from Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe by Jim Tilley. Jim, thanks so much for being a guest. It was as fun to talk to you as I thought it would be. It really entertaining time and learned a lot.
Same here. It was a great deal of fun. Thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jim. And once again, it was Jim Tilley. You can find all of Jim's work, the novel he mentioned, other books of poetry at jimtilleypoetry.com. That's Jim Tilley is Tilley poetry.com. So find all his work there. And now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem in the first person perspective in which something is repaired with the use of a most unlikely tool. That's a most unlikely tool, not the. Doesn't have to be the most unlikely, just a most unlikely tool. That's your prompt for this week. If you have a poem like that you'd like to share, all you have to do is email it first to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com. Email it there so we can show it on the screen as you read it. And then go to the Zoom, which I'm going to post into the chat windows on Facebook or YouTube. Just go to that link and share the poem. If you want to just enjoy poems too, sit tight right where you are, because it's the best place to view them is the stream you're on, because you can see the poems too. You can't see them on Zoom. But if you want to share something, come over to the Zoom, and we'll see you there in just a moment. We'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. We got our prompt poems editor here, Katie Dozier. How you doing, Katie?
I am doing great, thanks. I'm excited to see what everyone's come up with for this prompt. Maybe a little bit of a more breather than the villanelle.
Definitely one that's easier to tackle. Very open-ended, just with the topic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what did you come up with this week?
Okay. Well, maybe I'll read it and then I'll say what the unlikely tool is. It's not the most obvious.
Okay.
I'll say that.
It's not the title.
Well, I don't know. Is it?
We'll find out. Okay.
Prism. I can still see, if I squint, the cracked glass of the gold pocket watch. I understand. I, too, have laid there, broken on a stained sidewalk, without a single marigold pushing up. I, too, have stomped on myself and looked around for any 2 feet to blame. But all the same, the hands are still moving, the quartz is still coursing, and I tell you only now, thousands of ticks on, the tally of all these talks has taken me to many more interesting stops, and were it not for the broken glass shards, were it not for the way we all scream when stepped on, were it not for the clear fact that I can break anything, then I couldn't quite believe that I can also fix it.
Well, that's a really interesting poem, Katie. So
Thank you. Okay, so what was broken was the watch, because that's a little bit obvious. And then what fixes it is viewing it differently. So viewing it as the ability to be a prism. So time fixes it. And then they're also...
And perspective, too.
Yes, and perspective, which is represented by the metaphor of the prism. And then it's also 23 lines, and then plus the title equals 24 to represent every hour on the clock.
Oh, my gosh. She had so many little things hidden in there, Katie.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that was a great poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it, so it's
Yeah,
nice.
it is.
Yeah.
Thanks. I meant it's the first time you've seen it. I'm not really complimenting me. I mean, I'm happy with it, but...
Oh, this is great.
Okay.
Well, this week, for the first time, I didn't come up with a poem.
And you are excused.
I am excused. Yeah, a lot
You're
of things
excused.
at the last minute going on around here, so I wasn't able to, in my usual, like half an hour before the show, was completely consumed by something else. So
It was, but can I ask you to read the Needle Nose Pliers poem?
read the Needle Nose. Was that your inspiration?
It's always my inspiration. I love this
always-
poem.
Okay, it is a great poem.
Yeah.
And it is, Needle, nose, pliers, rattle. Okay. So this is Josh Parrish. I like this poem a lot, but
I love
especially
it.
in love
love
with this
it.
poem. Okay.
Okay.
Should I read it or should I have Josh read it?
You should read it.
Okay.
This is my request.
It is your
poem,
request.
This is my price.
Okay, this is Needle Nose Pliers by Josh Parrish. Do you know what Do you know what is never the right tool for the job? Needle nose pliers. Anytime I use needle nose pliers, it is with hopeless resignation. I stare at a thing needing fixing, shake my head, and say, I guess I could try needle nose pliers. I do not blame whoever invented them. They look like a very good tool. Would you like to twist, pull, or push something small in a tight little space? Here is a tool where one end fits your palm and the other end grabs tiny things. In the middle are even wire cutters, should you need to cut wires or something similar. The truth is, would you like to strip, shred, or otherwise destroy a thing? Plus, also pinch all hell out of that soft cushion of flesh at the base of your index finger? Then here are the needle nose pliers. And that is a very fun
I
poem.
read it as an Ars Poetica, too. Like, I don't know what to do, so it's going to be a poem, guys.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, so that was Josh Parrish from Rattle 79, spring 2023.
Thank you for reading that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, well, that'll fill in for my poem nicely. Maybe I'll try to write something tomorrow morning or something.
Don't worry.
Anyway.
Okay.
All right, well, let's go to the prompt lines. And first up is none other than Dick Westheimer. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
I literally counted to 10 before I clicked on the link.
You're just too fast. What can we say?
And as Stephen Croft said, well, 10 to the power of 0 is 1. So
That's true. I don't know how. I don't know. Maybe it's some algorithm. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're
It
always
could
first
be.
on the list.
well, I'm always first in my book. So there's that. Speaking of first, starting from that wonderful Poets Respond poem to all the discussion and poems of the guest, it's been a great hour. Really
Yeah,
terrific.
it was a fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, I knew.
that's really
I was
interesting.
serious when I saw all the things Jim done. I thought, well, he's definitely
Yeah.
a guest. Didn't look at the book first. I just said,
Well,
sure.
no, and I never thought I'd hear Euler's constant discussed on a poetry podcast.
It
So
did feel particularly suited to you. I found myself thinking even during
it
the
was-
episode.
Exactly. Even the title sounds like a Dick Westheimer
Yeah.
poem.
well, not
right.
this time. I had a really hard time with this prompt. I mean, really hard time because I have all the right tools. I mean, it's like after 50 years here, I have like every tool. And unlike the poem says, that's what I use to fix things. But I faked it in the poem.
Well, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Here we go. What to do when there is no right tool. After 50 years on the farm, I have all the tools I need to get any job done. When I was young and not yet dumb, instead of a hydraulic jack, I'd use a stump and a stout post to raise the front of my tractor. I'd support the axle with a stack of bricks and crawl beneath to drain the crankcase oil, to grease the bearings and clean the brakes. I could always solve for X, find a way to get stuff done if I'd sit for a long minute on a log, chin in hand, and cogitate. But now I'm a much older man and don't have to improvise because I've accumulated all the tools I need in my barn. But all those twist bits and power drivers and buzzsaw blades and dull chisels and socket sets and jack stands and planes, brand new cordless tools are scattered like memories strewn on shelves. 7 hammers I never use are hung next to 2 old fencing tools. I no longer have a fence. Batteries I've forgotten to recharge are jumbled in a box on the floor. So often can't find what I'm looking for, much like the faces of long dead friends whose phone numbers I still know. So thank goodness there are always stumps and posts and stacks of bricks and a log on which to sit and cogitate.
Yeah, I love that, Dick. Great ending too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had nothing to fix there, so I kind of missed the prompt. That's what I do with all the tools I
Well,
have.
fixing the need to fix something. So there you go.
That's
A
true.
little
There we go.
meta poem buried in there.
Thank y'all. Appreciate you.
All right,
Thank
thanks, Dick.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer once again with What to Do When There Is No Right Tool. And next, let's go to Christiana Doucette.
I feel like there must be an algorithm because I think this like lineup happens
Really?
fairly often.
That's really interesting. So maybe, I mean, I assume I'm doing it because people like add on the screens. I
Yeah.
assume it's like,
Maybe I just have a good connection, which is kind of weird because
Maybe.
we only just got internet back here and
Uh-huh.
I feel like the internet's really slow. So I thought, I'm probably gonna be like far beyond the beginning this time. I guess not.
Yeah, well, that's weird. I wonder. Maybe there is. I don't know what it would be though. Like, what is it basing on? But anyway, so what did you have to share this week?
Well, I think all my poems are still coming out hurricane right now. So it's
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that
Well,
makes
more
sense.
related
yeah, it
to like,
definitely does.
yeah.
Mhm.
hurricane cleanup this time.
Mm.
And I feel like it really fits the poet that we just heard because I talked a little bit about science because we homeschooled until a year ago. So I did a lot of science with my kids, and that came out in this poem.
Yeah, and we got some photographs too of the
Yeah.
the scene, which is
gosh,
really
that's
rough.
really
So this is
awful.
this is Christiana's house,
My neighbor's house.
neighbor's house. Okay,
Neighbor's house.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
We
That's
just
some of
we had a smaller tree on ours. Did not
Yeah.
affect us the same way.
Yeah, it really does remind me so much of the ice storm that I had when I was a kid, because it was like that. It was just piles of trees everywhere. Once the ice melted after the next day, it was just this trees and trees and trees everywhere. Yeah.
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 So the name of this poem is The Science of Falling Things. Do you want me to go ahead and read?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Science of Falling Things. Outside, the yard is gap-toothed. It's like there's been a war. Oaks choke the yard with limbs askew, every view more branches, trunks thrown open wide, contents tossed helter-skelter. This woodland shelter opened to the storm, and the storm swung a baseball bat like our street was a smash room instead of a diamond. We are home safe, but nothing will ever be the same again. From the kitchen window, as dishwater dampens my shirt, the break in the trees leaves me breathless. What of our nightly guest? The owl, the waterfowl that fish Brushy Creek, the hawk who stalks our back for squirrels. Human neighbors are safe, but what of the furred and feathered, and the trees whose blessed shade made summer evenings easy? They're splayed wide, all they hide exposed. My daughters stuff their pockets with acorns and unpack the tiny catapult built summers ago when we explored the science of falling objects. We paired it with an egg drop, parachuting Humpty Dumpty's unfortunate cousins from the back deck with packing peanuts, Lucky Charms, and balloons. Only one survived to be eaten over easy. Now the catapult launches acorns into the backyard. I wipe my wet hands and watch things falling into place. The science of falling things smashed our street. Now it plants acorns in the Carolina clay, where the red mud welcomes every missile, wrapping each future oak in the ground it needs to grow.
Yeah, wonderful poem there. And we had I didn't show, there's a picture of the catapult too.
Yeah.
In the pictures. Yeah, wonderful poem and great memory, and glad, things are going well with the cleanup.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Christiana.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was Christiana Doucette with The Science of Falling Things. And let's go to Lisa McDougall next. So since I'm having...
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Yeah, great to see you. I think we're going to start varying it again. I used to vary, and then I thought it was in order, and I just do that. I'm going to vary it again. So
All right.
no more order imposed. But anyway,
Okay.
How you doing, Lisa?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great, yeah.
Oh, good. I that came up with this at the last minute because I've been trying to rack my brain trying to remember. I know being a Gen Xer coming up with random solutions for things. I actually originally thought of I think it's John Silverman with the matches and the tape deck to keep it playing. And then all of a sudden it just kind of hit me today. So I had a little personal story. So here it goes. Do you have it up or?
I couldn't find it. Do you want to just read it? We'll just hear it.
Sure, no problem. Okay. It's called Another Way. Hot water on plastic lid won't loosen. Try again. Open a drawer, pull out hammer. Tap the edges like a cat pawing at a food dish. Gently at first, then hard until the lid pops off, just as my friend walks in, sees me holding a peanut lid, a butter jar, a hammer, and a grin.
That's great at the end, Lisa. Yeah, so that was the way, right? And I love that way that scene played out.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just want to attest that no peanut butter was spilled when it happened to me. So I
Goodness.
gently wrapped the hammer around the lid and it came off. But I thought it must looked a little extreme when my friend walked to the door.
I can relate.
Yeah,
very much.
definitely. Yeah, that's really
Thank
fun.
you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lisa. There was Lisa McDougall with The Way. Let's go to Zoe Turin next.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, Zoe. Yeah, great to see you again.
Yeah, good to be here. Okay, so I tried to do something different and with a kind of overused metaphor. So you can tell me if it worked or not.
Interesting. Okay.
great.
I see the format's unusual too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Depression. You've sunk into the pit again. I saw it happen, tried but couldn't catch your hand before you slipped below the surface. I can still see you, distorted by the fluid's languid ripple. Even all the light's tricks can't pull your features into any sort of expression. You look back, right through me. The obvious solution is to build a hoist to lift you out. So I start, as is tradition, with a list of specifications. 1, the distance to raise you, the depth of the pit, your height, plus a bit. 2, the requisite lifting capacity, a simple formula for the force to lift you out. For this I need your weight, 170 pounds, your surface area, 22 square feet, the time I'm willing to wait, I'm patient. The dynamic viscosity of your fluid submersion, unknown. This is a problem. I could perform a test or two to estimate the unknown coefficient. I could invite you out, maybe dinner with friends, measure how hard you resist, work backwards. But it seems cruel to draw forth the obvious no's from your lips, to make you fight for the energy for words, to grab your hand and try to pull you free when I know I don't have the strength. I wish I did. I wish I could say that I used the long lever arm of love to lift you out. Not long enough, I guess. But the machine doesn't have to work. That was never the point.
Yeah, really wonderful. I mean, so creative in the way you use that poem.
Yeah.
And then, really real movement to the ending too. Yeah. And a perfect poem for today, talking to Jim Tilley and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that,
really
Zoe.
creative and interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for the fun prompt.
Yeah,
Thanks, Zoe.
Yeah, that was Zoe Turin with Depression. Next, let's go to Brian O'Sullivan, who the algorithm had not been kind to recently.
No, I mean, I think for like a year it hasn't been kind. I don't think Brian's like always last, come to think of it.
I just assume that I'm slow, but it's nice if it's an algorithm.
Yeah,
I
that's
like
Brian.
Well, I thought you were just like graciously taking your time, like letting people in.
He is a gentleman. It's true.
Absolutely.
It's
So I
true.
thought like Brian just like waits, and then I'll give him
I'm
a bit.
going to stick with
It's
Tim's
very
story.
kind.
I like that story.
I like that story too. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. So I actually started to write this during the taping of the Poetry Space last week. You said something about how a villanelle could actually possibly be useful to propaganda in some way. So the tool is a villanelle, and so is the poem.
Before I started shushing Tim about it during the episode.
Well, sorry, I'm blowing it. Yeah. So it's called To Save the World, a villanelle. The world is burning. It all is going to hell. Where should I turn? Whatever can I do? I've got it. I shall write a villanelle. I'll write it well, and sure it will compel my faithful readers to rise up and rescue this burning world that's going so fast to hell that every tick-tock sounds a death knell for something that was cherished, something true. I've got to write a mighty villanelle to fix what's broken and to softly quell the rising tide of fear and to undo the burning of the world and turn its course from hell. Some may say that I must be unwell to think it matters what I say or do, but I've got to. To write a villanelle will be a way of casting a magic spell to help save our world by saving me and you from despair that would burn our hopeful love to hell. We've really got to write a villanelle.
That's nice, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way it turned at the end too.
Yeah,
Taking that,
definitely.
which is the other thing we talked about, is taking humor and then spinning it into something more profound.
Do you like
too.
the way that he proved your point?
I think I have to confess. Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Brian.
I think,
Yeah.
Brian,
pleasure,
you need at least a whole chapbook where you have villanelles with villanelle in the
And the
refrain.
villanelles, yeah.
You've got
I
at
thought
least
about
two that I know of, and I think it's great.
Those are the only two so far, but maybe I will.
Well, follow your own advice and go write more.
Well, Jen and I are going to try to, since I claimed at the end we were going to write a villanelle. So,
Oh,
yeah.
good.
That's
Oh,
true,
well, that's
yeah.
great.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Brian.
Well, thanks so much, Brian. Yeah. And that was a Poetry Space, Katie's show. You can find it on YouTube or not YouTube, Spotify and iTunes.
Yep,
iTunes is what I was going for.
Yeah, I know.
And and we talked about villanelles with
Yeah.
Anna M. Evans, one of the best formal poets around. She was
Yeah.
on Rattlecast around 150, and wonderful use of villanelles in her books, including that. What was the book called? Villains and Superheroes and Villanelles.
Yeah.
So fun episode if you want to find that and learn a lot more about the form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun.
All right, let's go to Siobhan Brownlee and next, as of course it's very late where she is, which the algorithm should know. Just put her up first. Hey, Siobhan.
Hello. Right, so I took the sense of tool very much in a metaphorical sense.
Great.
Something quite unusual, probably. But not at all humorous, different from the last poem. So it's a different sense of a different kind of justice. That's what the tool is. So our normal sense of justice, retributive justice of someone does a crime, they're punished for it. And then this is about restorative justice when you try to heal a situation. So it's a different way of based on pardon and apologies and that kind of thing. And the actual case was in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, after the end of apartheid. And the particular case here is an American student who was studying in South Africa, and she got caught up in the violence at the end of apartheid. And so here it is. I don't have a title for it.
Okay.
So, Mongezi. Car stopped and the driver came out. We chased her, tripped. I got a knife from the crowd and I stabbed her on her left side. Mr. Beale. A call came through. Family emergency. I couldn't believe it. Wrote a letter to her on the plane. I said she'd had a well-spent life. Mongezi's girl cousin. To be honest, I didn't care. She's a white woman. How many blacks have been killed? What the hell? Mongezi's boy cousin. The problem of that time was that anyone could do anything to anyone because of the situation. Mongezi. In the week it happened, a Boer shot a schoolboy from Guguletu Township, died before my eyes. No mercy, we were singing freedom songs. Killing a white would force the government to hear our demands. Mongezi's mother. It's going into Christmas time. Her mum sitting and eating at the table, but she's thinking, there's one person short. Mrs. Beale. When Amy went to college, she began to support Mandela. My husband and I want to honor Amy, so we agree to amnesty. Mongezi. Oh God, it makes my heart sore to hear how they describe her. I've beaten someone who should not have been hit. If I could undo what we did.
A powerful story there. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Siobhan.
Yeah, so the idea is that these people who had committed crimes on both sides were able to ask for amnesty, apply for amnesty under the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in exchange for telling the truth and for it to be politically motivated. And in this case, it so happened that the American student, she was just killed because her color was white, but she was actually an anti-apartheid supporter. And that's why her parents agreed to the amnesty. They said, in honor of our daughter, we accept this question of amnesty. So it's an unusual type of justice, because our normal way of thinking, you think if someone's done something wrong, they get punished. Here, in order to heal the problems in South Africa to go forward, they had this idea of amnesty on either side.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting story.
Yeah,
it definitely is. Thanks for sharing it.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Siobhan Brownlee with Untitled as of yet. Next, let's go to Bijwajit Mishra, who also is toward the end of the line that means nothing, apparently. Hey, Biz! How you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. Great, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, something... algorithm must have done something. I was thinking I'm coming at the end.
Okay, so there you go.
Because I did take time today. Like 5 minutes. I wanted to use the bathroom, so I came back. I said,
how dare you? No, I'm just kidding.
So, I don't know. I got a pass today, so that's good. Okay. Yeah, so my poem is Unscrewed. Should I read it?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I love the title.
Okay. After a long drive, after a long plan, for a long weekend trip, the friends sit down to unwind at a cottage. A bottle of red wine sits among a group, half of whom are teetotalers, and the other half are busy with their whiskey. And it dawns on the other half of the half, there isn't any corkscrew in the cottage kitchen, nor has anyone brought one. Like in the heat of the prep, a student forgetting to bring a pen to the exam, but here it is worse. There's no exam to take shelter under, nor any teacher around, except the teetotalers or the wives to borrow from, but the whole holiday is hanging by the thread. when someone comes with a knife, which rather than catching the cork, cuts it. And like a squirrel whittling down a pine cone, their hope is shredding, and mouths are getting drier than the cab sat. They are fondling by turns, when each wants to take a stab at it, but the cork is stuck halfway into the mouth of the bottle. When patience reaches the teether's end, a genius has had enough. He goes straight with a screwdriver and shoves the cork down through the throat of the bottle. The cork is shattered into smithereens, but we pour it out, gulping the particles down before someone else is enlightened to come back with a tea strainer. And we are clean with the wine to repair our day of the travels of a weekend drive through clogged highways. But we are sure this is not going to be the only tryst of our wine bottle with a screwdriver or a knife or a tea strainer.
That's great. Yeah, I love that story, Biz. Yeah.
I have opened a bottle of wine with an electric screwdriver.
Oh, really?
I'm sure many people have done it. It's very easy to forget, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I admire the decision to just drink the cork until the tea strainer came out too.
Because they're getting impatient. This is like, you know how holiday weekend driving is.
Yeah.
Everything is fine. By the time you get, everybody's tired.
Yeah.
And then arrange food and family. And these guys are all, their throat is dry. They're waiting. And somebody's doing like this with it's not coming out.
Yeah, that is a very fun story. Thanks so much for sharing that, Biz.
Thank you. Have a good night,
Thanks.
Katie. And
Yeah, you too.
Okay. Okay, bye-bye.
Biz Mishra with Unscrewed. All right. Let's go next to Zachary Honeycutt, who is making a cameo. Hey, Zach.
Hey guys,
Hey.
long time.
Yeah, it's been a
Yeah,
bit.
it's been a while. You have different hair and everything.
Yeah, I got. Oh yeah, I got different hair, different location. Yeah,
Yeah.
different chair. Yeah, I'm out of my book nook, but I am wearing a shirt that just got out of the dryer, so I feel really warm and cuddly. So that's good.
Nice.
Well, that's great.
But,
So what do you got for a poem here?
Right, yeah, now that I got that out of the way, I'm gonna do the villanelle, of course, from last week because I wanted to do that. I wanted to be here last week, but so yeah, I think that this might have been one of my favorite prompts, Katie. I had a lot of fun changing the lines with this one.
Oh, great. I'm
Oh,
glad
yeah.
to hear it.
When you fall, we fall for the disguise, not love itself. Who among us hasn't traveled down dark roads? I fall in due season, then return to myself. We see Jekyll and pick Hyde against our health. Who among us hasn't traveled down those roads? We fall for the disguise of love itself. We see both but run to hide with stealth. Then we search for someone who lightens our loads. I fall in my season, then return to myself. We fall like leaves from the tallest tree of ourselves, as we hope to land on someone who lightens our loads. We may fall for the demise of love itself. We fall and wind back time itself, replaying scenes we stole with the one who lightens our loads. We fell in due season, but never returned to ourselves. We fall like a house from the storm, repair the self. Find a dry hotel to render your water-soaked odes. We fall, then rise to the skies of love itself, in and out of the storm we couldn't come back from ourselves.
Oh yeah, I love those refrains and the way you mix
it's
them up
really
too.
nice with the
Yeah.
progression. Mm-hmm.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, good example of how to do a villanelle.
Yeah, it
Wow.
really is. Yep.
Yeah, it was really weird. It started out as like a Christian poem, and I was thinking of that verse, like their fall is not fatal. And then I started writing it, and I don't know, it turned into a relationship poem. I got the refrains first, and then I got one line and another, and I don't know, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to write.
Yeah.
Great. Well,
that's
that's
nice to hear,
evident
yeah.
in the poem that you enjoyed yourself, so that's great.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Zach. Great to see you.
Thanks.
See you
Yep.
guys. Yeah, you too. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Zachary Honeycutt with When You Fall. Next, let's go to Hamid Malik.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hey, Hamid. Great to see you.
You too. So I'm still stuck on forms now. You got me started. So mine's a Pantoum. And
Yeah, we love Pantoum.
Yeah, I think I might like Pantoons even better than Villanella's, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I really
Whoa.
do. So I'm
That's
excited.
shocking.
Yeah, it was a hard. I mean, this will be a prompt again, or at some point. Sorry.
yeah, just the repetition. It's just so mesmerizing.
Yeah.
My favorite hammer nails a little Pantoum. I've taken to repeating errors past. It's possible that someone changed the rules, and I've been sitting all this time aghast at whispers of, my God, she is a fool. I'm pretty sure that someone changed the rules, so now I tell you what I really think. I whisper loud, my God, you are a fool. You lost me to your preference for critique. I do not need to tell you what I think. Your mirror waits to show that you're a tool, but I've learnt from your preference for critique that I'm enough shall be my golden rule. Because I see the value in a tool, you may be sitting for a time aghast. Now I'm enough shines as my golden rule. I relish in repeating errors past.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful, the way the refrains move through that. Yeah.
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 That was really mesmerizing.
I will stop attacking my ex-husband soon, I promise.
But we're all enjoying it so much.
I'm not really quite that cross with him, but it's good material.
I understand. I feel the same way in a lot of my films. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Yeah. Wonderful work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks. Yeah.
Poems are so great on the prompt.
They are.
They're so good.
Yeah, they are. They always are. They just get better and better every week too. Yeah, that was Hamid Malik with my favorite hammer. He nails a little Pantoum, which is funny
Yeah,
too.
it's good.
All right, let's go next to Laura Berg.
Hello.
Hi, Laura.
Well, I actually, so I wrote a new poem this week for the prompt, which is about George Washington's dentures.
That's interesting.
Turned out to be made of hippo teeth, and
wow.
But I would actually rather read this one, The Shipwrights. It's underneath it, so
okay.
Maybe I'll post the other one on the Facebook page.
Okay. Oh, yeah, sure. That sounds great. And so, what's the Shipwrights? What's that about?
So this is from I'm going to read this one, but it was on a visit to the Naval Academy Museum, but it involves some interesting tools. So
yeah, interesting.
The Shipwrights. In moored, dismasted hulks, rigging stricken, atilt off England's southern coast, French prisoners, conscripted artisans, would fish ration bones from mutton stew and bleach them in the sun. A half-pound of meat per day times thousands of men. That's a lot of bones to pick and carve by candlelight with chisels made of barrel slats, drills of sewing needles. From memory, they'd built full-rigged bone ships of the line, threads of human hair running pulley to mast, gunport strakes of baleen. Add retractable gun decks, tiny lifeboats to hang from the davits, a stern transom gallery carved like a Baroque church facade, figureheads of Mars and Minerva. The public could ogle them at work in Liverpool's prison market. They'd hawk their crafts, once dubbed the English way, with names such as HMS Victory, afloat in a sea of polished straw. As we peer inside, fragments of ourselves also slot into place, alongside slivers of goat, cow, whale, our eyes scratching stanzas into the helm. From the ship of death, up floats the ship of life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, very great details about that poem, Laura. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That was Laura Berg with the Shipwrights, the National Academy Museum, Annapolis, which I've never been to. Let's go next to Chelsea McGlynn.
Hello. Is my mic working this time?
Hi.
It is,
Yes,
yeah.
it is.
Yeah,
Okay,
great to have you on. Yeah, thanks for being here, Chelsea.
Yes. My poem is called Atrial Fib. And I think I followed the prompt this time, so start reading it.
Okay, yeah.
Atrial Fib. My heart broke, not like a watch winding down too soon, but like my cousin's Furby, who would clack its plastic beak and screech its name, no matter how long we buried it, in the grave of her closet. My heart did not sleep. No, it rattled the doorknob and rapped at the frame, a beast frantic for release, while I trembled at the thought that one day it might succeed. Even years later, after that almost death day, I still feel the telltale thud as it bangs the key let out. But I'm not stupid enough to open that door. My doctor warns me reducing stress is the cure, and I wonder if he knows that all our bodies are haunted houses with something inside us we cannot control. I have seen the movies with all their tools, exorcism, sacrifice, or fire and prayer. Instead, I wield ignorance as I sweep out the cobwebs, repaint the blood-stained walls, and pretend the knocking isn't there. If anyone asks how it's going, I lie. Everything is fine, I swear.
I love the idea of a contemporary telltale heart being a trapped Furby. That is hilarious.
Right.
I remember when I got one, and then eventually I was like, oh, this is a be careful what you wish for moment. The Furbies.
Yeah, I've never seen an actual Furby.
Oh,
I mean,
God,
I
don't
can't
tempt
recall,
me. Don't tempt me.
But I know what they are roughly, and that's terrifying. A good Halloween poem. Being prepared for that. Yeah, thanks so much, Chelsea.
You're welcome.
Thanks. It was Chelsea McGlynn with Atrial Fib.
They really are scary, though.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm imagining is like the Gremlins, but like before they become the Gremlins.
Just like
you know,
the way their eyes pop
that
open.
does sound scary.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Rod DC next.
Hello, good evening.
Hi,
Hey,
Rod.
I've done a poem, kind of cheated a bit here because.
Hey, Rod, your bandwidth is low today. Do you want to turn off the video? We'll just listen to the audio.
Okay,
I think it'll be
try
less
that.
likely to cut out. Yeah. Okay.
All right. I'm cheating slightly because I'm making a repair without a tool. So
there's a tool
of your mind.
No tool. The mind
You'll
tool.
see what I
Jedi
mean.
mind tricks.
it's a totsurima called Sunday Morning Going Down. 2 a.m. Sunday, must be time to fight. As the bars close, drunk 20s roam the town, ready to rampage at the smallest slight. Most face-offs fizzle out when one man's down over some hot girl both fighters vie for. A few contests rise from an urge to wound. They turn crazy, primeval, something more. A vicious conflict rolled right up to me. One man miskicked and just missed my van door. The other snatched a stake that held a tree and swung it fast to finish off his fight. He missed his man, hit the van, then ran free. He left an angry, dark hole in the night. Another in my van window, down low. Before I leave, I need to set things right. Why the glass did not shatter, I don't know. But I must plug a 6-inch jagged hole. And tonight's forecast gives rain, maybe snow. I have some duct tape, a shiny black roll, and a book of strong poems, 9 by 6. The situation is under control. Ghazals cover the whole, a perfect fix. And then waterproof duct tape seals it twice to keep out rain or a wintry mix. I'm tired. I think this quick trick will suffice. So I'm going home to bed. Is that all? No. When parking downtown, some free advice. If you think you might park near a battle, bring duct tape and a copy of Rack.
That's great. I saw that coming out of the corner of my eye, Rod.
Yeah.
Really fun ending
That's
there.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, that was so much fun.
I think we're going to have to follow that advice.
Yeah, that is, like so many uses.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rod.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's a Ratisi with Sunday Morning Going Down. All right, and next we have Mike Bales.
Yeah, I'm sometimes a little late because I'm like the excitable klutz. I see that I'm gonna like click on the thing, my finger kind of quivers. But that's me.
Well, it's me trying to sign up for the boarding in Southwest.
Yeah, that is.
Like 1 second later, it's like
no,
massive...
C40.
I know. Anyway,
as an aside, I used to hear true life stories about surgeons working in the early morning. It's kind of scary. Their hands are kind of shaking while they're making all these cuts.
But
that
doesn't sound good.
Thanks to Rattle, I'm writing about poets that I hung out with a long time ago, which is my current poet. Oh, the subject Abyss, he thought the title was The Last Romantic Poet, and I said, no, it's Abyss. the word you use too often. Then he's telling me how to write a poem called The Last Romantic Poet. I think he'd probably want to be viewed as that. Well, we all like to be written about.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, I'm referring to someone else who I dated a while, and she's kind of an interesting character. The dating kind of flaked out, which it would when she's dating with other things. The title leads right into the poem.
Great.
So I sent it to you. If I could use a red ink poem, if I wake in the middle of the night, I could use a red ink poem pen. If I wake in the middle of the night and my laptop is closed, lying in the corner of the room, I could use a red ink pen to probe my dreams, color my thoughts, and let them bleed onto the page. I loved the color red when I was a child. Some people might say time heals, but I can't sleep and my body aches. I can't wait to give whatever stirs a form to embrace. Some people might say exorcism, but these feelings, I just want to guide them in their time and place. Once I dated someone who took the stage and read poems about her periods, calling them by name. She said that she wrote in purple. She talked about a lover, a man no one had seen, and as I sit alone, I wonder where she could be.
Yeah, another poem with a really nice turn at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike. So this is a whole a series of poems you got going now of poets I've known, like the Book of Poets.
That's true.
Yeah, I think we got to mention each other, even if I'm in touch with one of them, the friend I wrote Abyss about. Then for another website, I wrote about a friend who, the sad story is she had some problems and we're not sure she's still around with us. And in 2020, she wrote her own obituary. I haven't seen any death notice about her. This is pretty heavy.
Yeah.
But, and the funny thing is, I posted it on a thing called poetrysoup.com. And they're thinking I'm paying tribute to a fellow Poetry Soup person and who I never met, and they're taking comfort in that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so great. There's so many poets out there, like that have a real presence and then they're gone.
Yeah.
As an editor, I see that all the time.
And I always say, when in doubt, reach out.
For sure.
I don't always say that, but now I want to.
Yeah, well, it works. Makes sense. It might be the first time, but first of many.
They're posting a lot of stuff like that on Facebook. I think last month or so, we've had a national suicide prevention thing, and they're saying talk to people before it's too late.
Yeah.
Say something good because you don't know how much difference it's going to make.
That's true. That's something I've been thinking about a lot. I mean, just when you're out, you know, if you smile at somebody, it could be the difference of their day being awful or thinking, or like complimenting somebody when you're out. If you can give them a genuine compliment, you know.
Yeah, definitely true. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Mike.
Thanks.
Important poem, and really nice movement in it too. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, that was Mike Bales with I could use a red ink pen.
Yeah.
We both butchered your title, Mike.
Yeah.
I could use a red ink pen as the title. Okay, let's go to Chelsea McClellan next.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi,
Chelsea. Yeah, great to see you.
Great to see you too. I don't know if this technically completely fits, but it's where I got taken by the poem. My object is a tree and my grandmother. And I guess I'll leave it up to you if it's actually fixed or not.
Okay.
Or repaired, I guess. And the tool is a gaggle of children. So my poem is Grandma's Time. The old tree refused to split in half, succumbing instead to the wind. Root ball technically intact as they dangled above the soil, reaching for water with their paralyzed arms. Trunk laid flat on the grass, half her branches snapped and blown away. I told the kids to play by themselves while I ran to the barn, grabbed the shovel, loaded the wheelbarrow down with some heavy clay dirt. I worked as fast as I could on account of the sun setting and the children playing out of sight. From behind the stack of firewood, leaves and branches were rising, and the kids fell silent. Worn out after a hard day of wrestling, I found them resting under the old tree they'd somehow managed to raise. I let myself gawk a moment, hope. When they stood up, I wouldn't need my wheelbarrow or dirt or shovel.
Yeah, very, very sweet poem. I think that definitely counts for the prompt. There's no doubt about that.
No ambiguity there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, really beautiful story. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Chelsea.
Thanks, Chelsea.
Chelsea McClellan with Grandma's Time. And let's go next to Stephen Croft.
Hey, Tim and Katie.
Hey, I have to say, I saw something you put in chat that made me absolutely laugh, right? You called this the MacGyver prompt. Is that you, Steve?
Yeah. Brings back memories of the old television show.
Yeah, I used to love that show. It was like, for some reason, every time I went to my aunt's house, there was like some reason every Thursday I had to go. And it was like the highlight of I was like, oh, I get to watch MacGyver.
No.
I do remember that. Like, I don't know, like my parents didn't watch, I don't know what.
I did actually laugh out loud when I read that comment for the record.
Well, I'd like to say that, and thank both of you, Katie in particular, for the prompts. I have a prompt poem that is nominated for a push cart current.
That's great.
Oh, that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's great to hear.
I owe that to you in a way. This poem is first person plural. It takes place when I was in the Army, and it's hard to do anything alone in a war zone. There was one guy who went out by himself in Afghanistan and became a famous POW, but most of the time you're with people. So this is first person plural. There's some shame. Yeah. There's some shame in this, which hopefully the title will indicate. So this is confession. The camera's GPS signal brought us searching street by street. The Army's obsession with its equipment, the hound at our backs, until one of the Humvee gunners spots a white wing tipping out of a chamber pot pond, banked on one side by a crumbling mud wall. Sniper in the area over a week. Special forces called in after our casualty. the sniper got our Raven. Its big model airplane, white clipped from the sky, spun into this nightmare of sewage. Our dismounts are cautious as the gunners spin on turret rails, scanning windows above stretched ropes of laundry. A teen moves to us with the cheerful, needy pleading of Iraqi kids for American dollars, pointing to his chest, to the plane's wing, back to himself, told no by a sergeant who motions him away with an arm. The kid ducks under like a scrappy knife fighter. For American dollars, he says. We talk of some kind of hook tied to 550 cord, tossed out, decide someone could go back to camp, but by then it would be dark. We'd hold position too long, expect to take fire. Dark in the canyons of sand-colored houses is just one of our enemies. For American dollars, I think, as a staff sergeant snaps open his body armor, fishes a 5 out of a Velcroed ID wallet, before the kid wades into the waste with its benthic infections. If we leave, he'll go after it anyway. And anyway, I know he'll look for us tomorrow, smiling in a fresh tunic.
Yeah, what a tough story that is. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks. In a way, I read it with Veterans Day a couple of weeks away.
Yeah. I mean, so many just tragic stories like that, and so much, that needs to be recorded too. Thanks for sharing that, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Stephen Croft with a confession, and that's it for Poets on the Zoom. Let's. I know I saw a couple people here. Tina Dennett Claw was. Let's see. Oh, can I do that? I don't know if I can do this. Let's see. Tina Dennett sent her poem. Her internet is down, though. So I saw her, though, on her phone, I think, because I saw her in the chat. And she has both. She has the poem. Let me see if I can play the poem and the audio she sent, too. So let's see if I go like... Hang on 1 second. Just bear with me. I want to get this done for Tina. It's for Tina. Okay. So I'm going to download the poem so I can show it separately in like a file. And then I'm going to open up Tina's audio too so I can hear it. And then we will get both. And this is for The Love of Time.
Popular topic.
Yeah. Okay. So come on. Okay, opening up. There we go. So this is Tina's poem, and this is going to be Tina reading her poem. So here we go, and I'm going to turn this on. So I got to juggle a lot of stuff to get this to work, but it will. It will. Here we go. And then here's Tina's poem. Oh, this one. Nope. Hang on a second. It's coming. It's coming. There we go. Okay, here's Tina reading her poem.
For the Love of Time. On the roundabout in Kensington, there is a tiny shop where the keeper's occupation is cleaning and repair of clocks. Our neighbor recommended him, and so I ventured in, along with our wall ornament, a gift from our cousin. The focus of our morning rush, 15 years, now stopped. I entered clapboard storefront, giant windows lined with clocks, found a man in leather apron, bald head, blue eyes, round glasses with no rims. I laid our timekeep on his counter, told him what was wrong. It's plastic, his complaint. And so I pled. But it's been telling us we're running late for so very long. He stopped a moment, took a breath, then left. He climbed a ladder in his closet, searching, head and torso out of sight, returned with brush and oil in his pocket, opened screws on back, and lightly flicked around the plate that hid corroded wires. I'm sorry, this won't run. And for a moment, he grieved with me, amidst the antique mantel clocks that didn't have a home.
Yeah, so it's beautiful poem. That was Tina Denaclaw.
I might know exactly the shop she's talking about, actually, too.
Really?
If she's talking about Kensington, Maryland, I know a place that when I lived in Maryland for a bit, and I know a store that matches that description by a florist. That's the best florist in the world, Johnson's Florist. I really like.
Wow. Well, that's really interesting.
Very specific. Yeah,
that would.
They did TVs too, so I'm very curious. We're gonna have to hear from Tina next week or something about that.
Yeah, well, definitely, and really cool poem. Another great storytelling. Another example of that. Thanks for sharing that, Tina. And then Dr. Q, I also saw in the chat, and can't make it on the Zoom, but let's share this poem as well.
Looks like a haibin to me.
Looks like a haibin to me, but we won't let you read the haiku first.
Oh.
Okay, so here is Dr. Q's haibin. The cant opener rocks my world. I like that title. The cant opener rocks my world. We had set up camp, ready to cook, or heat up a can of Beanie Weenie, but no can opener, and we had no Kabar knife. Or the Swiss Army knife that has every tool you will ever need for absolutely any emergency. The spoons, forks, and knives are plastic. This camp trip was not well thought out, just a last-minute trip. He says, we do have a gun, maybe blast it open. I wasn't up for ingesting gunpowder or bullets. That may be overkill, and to that extent, I mount a search for a large rock with a somewhat flat surface. Eureka, found one. Lady MacGyver, again, here upends the can and scrapes it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Skipping the gym for camping seems to be no biggie now. And at last, the lid begins to separate. Flipping the can upright is easily removed. Beanie Weenie meal with coffee coming up in 3, 2, 1. Wait, what do you mean you forgot the coffee? Here's shooting stars, even so, Nirvana. I really like that haiku too.
I really like the interjection with the skipping the gym for camping. That's funny.
Yeah, that's true. Very fun with the chatty
really great.
and then the profound. I really good use of the haibin.
Really nice, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so
Dr.
much.
Q's been studying up on haibin. It shows.
Definitely has.
Yeah.
The cant opener rocks my world by Dr. Q. Thanks, Dr. Q, for sharing that. All right, and let's see. Do we have the venerable Ted Guevara? We do.
We'll see what he makes you say this week.
And also we have, let's do Gail Hemmon too. So Gail I saw on the chat, so we can read. Let me make it this small so I don't reveal. I try not to show anybody's email address just in case, and I'm not sure I can do that.
Except for mine.
That's true.
That wouldn't be dangerous.
So let's see. So we're gonna go. We'll do it like this again. We'll just put it in right here.
Okay.
And we'll go to this document now and switch it to this one. Is that right? Yeah. And here we go. This is Gail Hemmon with a poem for Philip's Grace on relieving fear. Very short poem here. In its glide, in its wings, in its air, in the cave, in the night of a bat, is the dark, is the wind of the world over us. Yeah, I really like the format of that poem. Yeah, that's really nice. So that was Gail Hemmon with Poem for Philip's Grace. Yeah, really interesting poem there. And now let's go to Ted Guevara. And Ted's poem is this. And as always, he includes a photo. Really getting into the fun of the AI is Ted. So this is a photo of a person swimming through, well, I got to show it on screen too. A person swimming through a street as if it's like water.
Yeah, as if the asphalt or whatever.
As if the asphalt's water, yeah. So he's like, doing the crawl, the main swim thing right there on the up the highway.
Not advisable.
Yeah, I wouldn't try that at home, folks. Yeah, kids don't do that. And the poem is Forget. Forget. To break or not feel the boundary of water takes a certain grace or absent-mindedness. We are not that old that curves in our skull decalcify. Sorry. We are not that old that curves in our skull decalcify. Sorry, Ted. What is this? We prefer to be forgetful as we age, not sharp or still have the spade to dig such unforsaken depth. Let me swim in place, or move so fast that memory in my eyes slips automatic. There is a basic tool for that. I remember it well. A hammer so bold it dominates the drawer. So far from my hands now it doesn't weigh me down. The stop end of you should be pulled out from the hard wood. Yet I swim with nails at my feet, pretending in bed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Now that Ted is I mean, I don't recall that there was many AI pictures. I wonder if he's ever put in his poem as a prompt to get a picture from. 'Cause it feels like that could be what's going on here, almost.
Yeah, it seems like it could.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Maybe Ed's playing with that. GPT 4.8 or whatever is out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very cool stuff. Thanks for sharing that as always, Ted. Always a lot of fun. All right. And now I believe it is time for the Sciku. And we did not have a poem from myself today, but we did have a Sciku.
That counts as a poem in my book.
That counts as
That's
a poem
from you.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, the story is this, and I was drawn to this knowing we'd have some physics talk coming up on this episode, and I found this from MIT News. And I like the concept of this. It's an interesting just phrase right here. It is astronomers detect ancient lonely quasars with murky origins.
Quasars, I love.
Yeah, so the quasars appear to have few cosmic neighbors, raising questions about how they first emerged more than 13 billion years ago. And so, as we were talking about with Jim, there's a lot of questions about how old the universe actually is, and some conflicting data, especially with the James Webb Telescope. But one of the big questions for a while has been how the quasars could be as old as they seem to be sometimes. And quasar is formed by a supermassive black hole in the center of a galaxy, usually, that is absorbing so much gas all at once. It shoots out these cosmic jets as the process of passing the event horizon with a lot of matter. Anyway, the thing is, it would have to have a lot of substance around it. Like, it'd be surrounded by like galaxies and stuff. I mean, a lot of like actual matter, not dark matter, to make the quasar. And yet they're so old. Like, how could all the matter get there? Is a big question. And what they found are these sort of lonely quasars that are maybe there's dust. It's sort of mysterious, but they find these quasars, and they're the brightest objects in the universe too, because but they're sort of there's nothing around them mysteriously. There's these ancient lonely quasars that the James Webb Telescope has found. Yeah. So maybe there's like they're surrounded by dust still, but it's still strange. So that's the article. And then the Sciku based on that article is this. Cosmic dust at the lonely quasar's estate sale. So that is the Sciku this week. Cosmic dust at the lonely quasar's estate sale.
Go to that estate
yeah, me
sale.
too. So anyway, that's the Sciku, and that is the show for this week. Now, what do we have on tap for next week's prompt?
I honestly, our afternoon was insane, and I don't even remember the prompt I came up with earlier.
Well, would you like me to read it, or do you like to read it?
I'll read it. Let's see what I did.
Okay.
Write a poem in which someone wears a costume. Include as many sounds as possible.
Oh, interesting. So the costume inspired by Halloween, I imagine.
How dare you? Yes.
What are the sounds? Why the sounds?
The sounds, I liked him. We've done prompts before that focus on one of the senses, and I thought it would be interesting to think about. I think with Halloween and the fall, there are so many sounds and so many things that we can
crunch
listen
of leaves, the smashing of pumpkins.
Yeah, there are so many sounds. See?
Yeah.
So I think it'll be fun, and I think also it's just it's so easy to stay sight focused in poetry and everything. And really, I mean, you can evoke so much with sound or smell or anything like that. So I think sound will be fun.
Well, very cool. Well, looking forward to that. Maybe I'll write 2 next week. We'll see.
Well, great.
But that's the prompt. Write a poem in which someone wears a costume. Include as many sounds as possible. So that should be fun. It's a good time of year for that.
Yeah.
And next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be B.A. Van Cees. So B.A. Van Cees is a poet. He's been in Rattle. He was a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize once, but he's much more well known as a photographer, and he's a really wonderful photographer. He had this book of portraits of poets called some Leaves of Grass reference. I can't remember exactly how it's phrased, but it's wonderful. And he's got these great people. He has like Mark Doty as the cover, and Mark Doty is like buried up to his neck in the woods.
Oh wow!
You know, he's got these
sounds great.
poets in really strange things, but he's got another book that's coming out on the national language, which is the poetry of America's endangered tongues. And so he has poetry from a bunch of languages that are fading out as the cultures are overtaken. And so a lot of interesting poems and photographs, I assume, in this book as well. So I'm really looking forward to that too.
Yeah.
Really interesting person, B.A. Van Cees. That's Rattlecast 267 next week, the regular time, Sunday, October 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.